more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life on News Talk 1590 KVTA. We are talking for the next few weeks about a theme that I've been exploring personally, and it's about rebounding in your life and creating the new normal. And when we had Greg Braden on a couple of weeks ago, he started talking about how everyone is waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the normalcy to return to their lives when we experience all sorts of chaotic things, death, divorce, diagnosis, those kinds of things. And we continue to wait for it to go back to normal. And what Greg was sharing with us is that there is no normal anymore. So we have to really dig deep to find our new normal. And so in the studio with me today is my producer and collaborator, Joyce Sherwood. Joyce, thanks for being here.
Hi, Susan. It's great to be here today. Thank you.
So let's just dig into this idea of rebounding in your life, because what I notice in my life when there's chaotic things that happen, or you feel like the rug's been pulled out of you because there's death, divorce, diagnosis, job loss, whatever it is, that I know in my life, I realized it this morning when I was doing some contemplative work. I'm waiting for my life to, in essence, begin again, which is kind of an idea that when something bad happens, then you get to start anew. There's truth in that, and yet there's the place where we think that the begin anew is going to be according to the way life has been before.
Right.
The normal thing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what's interesting to me, so I was thinking about this rebounding, which is why I was contemplating rebounding, because in rebounding, the idea is that you're going to rebound back into your life. And what I realized as I was thinking about that, it's not like, the basketball player that gets to do the free throws and then the ball gets bounded back to him, he gets to try again. It's more like you have to constantly be in motion to get the ball when it comes off of that backboard when you're in the play of the game. So when you're in the play of life, you're still in motion, and it's to catch the ball for the next play, the next experience, not the old experience.
Mm-hmm. We're always stepping forward, so there's always a new experience. There's a new now.
A new now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which, so those of us like you and I, Joyce, we do this contemplative stuff. We do meditation, and we try to be in the now.
Right.
And yet, what you just said, life is always moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always a chance to be the new normal. I remember in what Greg Braden said, the example he gave of the town the factory closed 9 years ago, and we're still waiting for it to open.
Yep.
That really stuck with me. It's like, wow, that they've been standing in place for 9 years. Einstein said that our problems can't be solved at the level that they were created. They have to be solved at a higher level. And I think this higher level is where our new normal is going to be.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we're heading for. We're up-leveling, and then that's going to be the new normal. And then after a period of time, we'll up-level again, and there'll be a new normal. It's a continuum like that.
Yeah. Okay, I hadn't quite thought it all the way through, Joyce. Thank you, because, So when people are saying be in the now, part of it is you have to be flexible for whatever the evolutionary course of your life is.
Yes. Yeah. Be in the now and be ready for the next now, which is we call it the future. And, so it's preparing yourself in some way, being more open, allowing yourself to be more more vulnerable, more open in some way, so that you can see the new thing when it comes by.
Right. Oh, yeah. So that means keeping your eyes and ears open and your
Right.
heart open and all of that stuff. It's interesting because, so kind of what we're talking about is the creative process too, right?
Yes.
You know, okay, so here's what I've been thinking about. When there is an experience of a death or a shattering of whatever there is in your life, it feels like that's going to be your always.
Right.
So in one way, that is your new normal for right now.
Right.
Your dog passes on. That is your new normal for right now. That grief and missing that being in your house and all that stuff. But it's kind of like there will always be what you just said. There will always be a new normal. So we have to stay focused on that because we're coming into spring now, and we just had in California, sorry about anybody that's listening in the other parts, but we just had amazing rain. And out of that, of course, there's blossoms on the trees, the grass is greening, there's, the hillsides are, thank God, turning green. And I thought, okay, no matter what darkness of winter, darkness of life experience there will always be a spring.
Right.
And that's the rebound. That's the forward motion.
Right. Yeah.
There will always be a new growth, a new springtime, a new,
Yeah, the fires, the floods, all the drought, all that is what is, and yet there will be a new beginning. There will be new opportunities. It will come back.
So what I'm hearing as we're talking, Joyce, is that the universe that we live in, the life that we live on this planet is constantly dynamic, and we've talked about this before, that there is something on the unseen side of life that is constantly creating something new in this manifested world, and that means we as human beings will be happier, and live a more grounded and prosperous and healthy life, all those things, mentally healthy, physically healthy, if we remember that and stay open and flexible to the changes, because change is the only thing that happens.
That's right. It's the only constant is change.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So in thinking about this whole idea of rebound and finding your new normal, it also in my experience up until now, it has also been in letting go of what I thought my normal was. It's also been this place of realizing that there's old habits I have that no longer work. The stuff that I used to do in my 20s is not working now in my later years, and I have to change those habits, or the ideas that I hold, the beliefs I hold about myself, while they may have been so or not when I was younger, they are definitely not necessarily true now. All those things. So there's that. Again, it's a constant motion, right?
It is, and I think also it's one that moves from competition to collaboration.
Oh, interesting.
New ways of solving old problems. I mean, problems that we've had. It's time for a paradigm shift. It's time for a new way of looking at these, what have been problems, and look at them as opportunities or things that we have yet to solve, but that in the solving, in the process of coming to some resolution, that there's a new way to do that. There may be a new, better way.
Yeah, I love that you just brought that up. I so love that because, and I've shared on Living Your Inspired Life before that I am in the process of a divorce, and what I'm looking at is what's my new normal, and what I realized is, wow, I was dependent on the honeydews that I could give my husband to do, and he would get it done, and together we were in partnership of all that, and now there's nobody there to do those honeydews, and I'm thinking, well, who is? And so I realized my new normal now is finding other people in my life that can support me in all the other things as I grow into becoming even more of a stable and independent person and whatever else. So for people that are listening, there may this idea of that's collaborating.
Yes.
You know, we think of it as, no, I'm hiring somebody to come and whatever, clean my garage or do my plumbing or whatever, you know. But really, that's the ultimate of collaboration is how we work in business as well.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're taking my money.
Right.
I get to give them a fair exchange for the work that they're doing for me, and that is collaboration as well.
Yes. Yep.
Interesting. Hadn't thought of it that way. So the other thing I want to talk about is Joyce and I have been working with a group in Ojai, and so we've been investigating a new book. So let's talk about the book. It's called The Gifts of Imperfection. Let Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are by Brene Brown. And Joyce, you have some information about who she is, right?
Yeah. Brene Brown is a researcher and a writer, and she started researching shame, the concept of shame, back in I think in the year 2000, and wrote her first book was about that, called I Thought It Was Just Me.
Oh yeah.
And from that, then she's written this book now called The Gifts of Imperfection, which talks about having a goal of living wholeheartedly. And wholehearted living is about engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. And so what are the things that keep us from feeling worthy? Because we feel we need to be perfect before we're worthy.
That's me. That's me. I'm raising my hand.
I must be perfect. I must have everything, all my ducks in order and everything right. And how that really can be so constricting to living a wholehearted life.
Well, that's interesting because what we were just saying earlier of the old way of being. So I'm a recovering, now perfectionist, But when I was in my 20s, that worked really well. When I was in high school and needed to get the A's to go into a good college, that worked really well. And then as I've gotten older, I realized that those perfectionistic ideals have become the thing that stopped me from really growing into a whole person.
Yeah.
And living that wholehearted life. So part of what she also talks about is this idea of, and this all fits into finding a new normal, everybody. Brene Brown talks about this idea of courage, compassion, and connection.
Right, that these concepts, practicing courage, compassion, and connection, our daily lives is how we develop this worthiness and practice. That's what we do. That these aren't things that we may think they should just come naturally to us, and yet they don't. I love that she takes the words and switches them around about it. She says, how do you get courage? You get it by courageous acts. It's like you learn to swim by swimming. You learn courage by couraging.
I
love that.
Well, it's interesting because I wonder how many people out there really think that they're courageous. I think that there's this, so again, this is kind of a perfectionist thing, but I think there's this ideal that you're really only courageous when you fight in a war or you rescue
You're being a
somebody.
hero. Right.
You rescue somebody.
Yeah. And Brene Brown says that ordinary courage is about putting our vulnerability on the line. It's our ordinary daily life where we need to be courageous, where we need to step up when we see something wrong, where we need to step up to speak our truth.
Right.
To be that ordinary courage. And that this has a ripple effect, that every time we choose courage, we make everyone around us a little better and a little braver. We're modeling courage. So other people say, well, yeah, I could do that too.
And that's inspiring to people.
Exactly.
Too. So, but let's go back to this this idea that she said about courage is about putting our vulnerability on the line, because I think that that's really, the key to. For me, has been the key for my new normal. The more I am willing to be courageous and be vulnerable, with my emotions, with my self-judgment, with my self-compassion, in reaching out to people, that feels vulnerable to me. The more I'm courageous in being vulnerable, the more I do feel whole, because, and it goes back to collaboration, because when I feel vulnerable and I reach out to somebody saying, well, I feel like I can't do this, I can't, do the plumbing or whatever it is, somebody will always come and say, okay, here, let me help you, or have you thought about this? And because we are naturally people who want to collaborate, who want to connect.
I think we are absolutely people. Human beings want to have that sense of connection, that being loved and connected is such an important thing. And I think that we're talking back about perfectionism, that vulnerability and perfectionism are two sort of conflicting ideas. I think those of us who tend toward perfectionism do it. It can be a protection against our vulnerability, because we do have everything lined up so perfectly, and so nothing will go wrong, and so we won't be made to feel ashamed for what we do, or that we made a bad choice, or that we're bad because we did that.
Right. And and I know so many people, they think of all the contingencies. Let's look at all the plans. What is all the different ways that this could work? Okay, I've covered all my bases. Now I can go out and do the thing. And it is more of an armament.
Yes.
And a protection device, and a separating you from connecting with other people. Okay, everybody, I am a recovering perfectionist, and I know that that's so. In trying to make sure that I'm doing everything right, I know that I was pushing some people away because I had judgment about them, because they didn't fit into my doing everything right plan. And since this huge breaking up of everything I know to be me, and rebounding, figuring my new normal, I really get that that perfectionism was keeping me from really living my life fully and wholly. And the vulnerability is the way I can access. It's really uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, being vulnerable is really, you feel so exposed and so open, and I'm the only one.
Right.
I'm surely I'm the only one who's ever felt this way, this open, this hurt, this raw, this abused, amused, whatever it is, that you're the only one, and you're not. What the book teaches is that these things that we used to think of as, well, that would make me less than, are really the things that make you more than, or that fill you up, and that lead you toward this sense of connection, compassion for others too.
I think that for many people, the biggest journey, I think it's easier to feel compassion for other people, because it helps take you out of yourself, out of your mishigosh, your stuff. And I think the harder journey, of course, maybe this is just me, but the harder journey is the self-compassion, is the self-forgiveness, which we've talked about here on Living Your Inspired Life a lot. The whole idea that being I wanted to say self-regulated, but I guess, but really being self-aware is a challenging practice, more than being compassionate and loving in the outer world.
Yes. Yep. She uses the quote from the American Buddhist nun Pema Chodron, who writes, "When we practice generating compassion, we can expect to experience the fear of our pain. Compassion practice is daring. It involves learning to relax and allow ourselves to move gently toward what scares us."
Wow. So I'm hearing it takes courage to be compassionate.
Yeah. Yep. It takes courage to be compassionate.
I got chills.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because and this idea of experiencing the fear of our pain.
Yeah.
How many times do we avoid pain because we're so afraid of it?
Right. I'm not going to go get that shot because it's going to hurt.
Right.
I'm not going to go for the colonoscopy that I'm supposed to have because, my gosh, how could that not hurt? you know? So.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. I think part of the new normal is starting to realize that our shared humanity. I think it comes from a shift of who do you think you are And who do you think you are to do that? And why do you think you're good enough to do that? A competition instead of a competition, more of a compassion. We all often, at least I do, when you see a homeless person on the corner, there, but for the grace of God go I, and oh my gosh, how can I turn fast enough to get away from this? It's that yin and yang thing, that paradox that's right in our face.
And in so many different ways. And I think you're right. I think the new normal now is recognizing that we're all connected, and how do we live in those uncomfortable or even painful places when we rub up against each other and we are feeling vulnerable and exposed. And and so your example of a homeless person, it triggers people into, okay, what can I do for that person? Or, oh my God, why don't they get a job? Why don't they? I was talking to a young woman last week, a new client. She's brilliant, and she was talking about how she went down to the soup kitchens and in LA actually, and worked down there, and she was just enjoying herself by sitting down with some of those people that are homeless and finding out about them. And she said they just lit up because I was there asking them questions about them and listening to them. So part of what Brene Brown talks about in the Gifts of Imperfection is that we want to be seen and heard, that each person that's what we really want. That's part of what connection is being valued. And she said that, okay, so let me read this quote about connection. The energy this is how she defines connection: the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. Yeah. And that's connection right there.
It is. And connection is about sort of letting go of the myth of self-sufficiency, that I can do it all by myself.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's one of the greatest barriers to connection, is this idea we have to go it alone, do it ourselves. We're willing to extend a helping hand, but we're often reluctant to reach out when we need help.
Oh, yeah, that was me.
Yep.
And that loops back to this perfectionistic idea. Well, I should be able to do it myself. A perfect person would.
And many of us are so willing to give, to give. Okay, so I'll give $5 to that homeless guy in the corner. But, and then when it turns around, when we need something, it's often harder to accept than it is to give. But you have to do both with an open heart to make that circulation, to make that flow, giving and receiving, and it's the vulnerability of receiving.
Oh,
sort
boy.
of that seems paradoxical that it should be easy to receive and take, but when we are so ingrained that, well, no, I can do this by myself. I did it by myself once before, so surely I can do it again now.
There.
And yet now we have a new normal.
Yeah, there. That's the thing, where we think we did it before, so why can't we do it now? And then we're ignoring that we are on some sort of evolutionary growth path.
Yes.
To whatever the next new normal is. And I remember reading in this book, Brene Brown was talking about when she was having a come apart, a big major life crisis, and she realized it wasn't a crisis, it was an unraveling. And I love that idea, a midlife unraveling, because and certainly that's what I've experienced, because then it's almost like I see a ball of yarn completely unraveled, and then you get to see how long it is and where it can reach, and then you get the idea of what you can make out of it. But when it's a tight knot, it's hard to pull it apart, and that's the challenge, and the pain.
Yes,
and sometimes it's the pain.
Yep. Yeah, and we so judge ourselves. We judge ourselves so harshly. I think more harshly than we judge someone else when we're going through these these painful experiences that are simply part of our life too. It's like, oh, how can I feel so bad about this? I should feel better about this. I should pick myself up and go out and do and this and that and the other thing. And when really, for whatever, because we humans are meaning-making machines, we like to attach meaning to everything, and sometimes things simply happen.
Right.
And so then it's, okay, so now what am I going to do about that?
Right. Well, and here's the other thing is that we think we're supposed to do something. Sometimes we have to just be in it. Like Dr. Goswami on our show last week talked about it. You've got to do things, and then you've got to be. You've got to relax. You've got to rest and allow whatever the creative process is to inform you within yourself or become aware of things outside of yourself, so that then you go, oh, okay, then the solution shows up of, oh, all right, this is what I'm supposed to do. I had a sweet, sweet friend of mine, very dear. I love this woman a lot. I was sharing some of my painful experiences about going through a divorce, and she looked at me at one point and said, well, aren't you kind of done with that? Shouldn't you just be over it? I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, I mean, just do what I do, compartmentalize it, put it in. And I was like, oh my God. I mean, there are people that can do that, and I can compartmentalize, but when it's something that is so,
When it's in every compartment in your life.
right.
Yeah.
And it's earth shattering and blah, 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 it becomes very challenging. I know that's true for people when they get a diagnosis. It's like their entire life flashes before them, and it's very hard to compartmentalize when you're dealing with a diagnosis. Especially if it's a life-threatening one.
Yep.
So finding the new normal kind of does mean about breaking out of these old habits or ideas and opening up our awareness within our hearts and our minds that there is something more that we're moving towards. At least this is the thing that I'm looking at is I was just reading also in her book, she talks about hope. This is future stuff, though. We're going to talk about it later. But she talks about hope is not an emotion. It's actually an action thing. It's the thing that you're doing to create your new life that gives you hope. And I thought, wow, interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Because I didn't, I
it's an action rather than a wish.
Right. Or a feeling. I mean, it becomes a feeling, but it's not an emotion, that you have to buy into. And so in the idea of trying to figure out where we're going in life when even if your day is really, even if your life is kind of fairly flowing fairly well, there's still this place of being open and aware that that change happens. And that means being flexible. That means being compassionate, having the courage to really explore your options.
Yep. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about the idea that she also has about belonging and love and being enough and all that stuff.
Right. She has that there's a big difference between belonging and fitting in.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that.
I thought that was
because that's
really
kind of a
interesting.
perfection. Okay. It is all about me, Joyce.
Okay.
Joyce Sherwood, I'm so sorry. But that is a perfectionist thing, It's what do I need to do to fit in, especially when we're growing up as kids, and certainly if, well, like for me, I have red hair, so I stood out like a sore thumb. There was no way I could fit in and blend with people. So the idea of fitting in is also part of wanting, that's part of the belonging, but is that what belonging is?
Yeah, fitting in is changing how you are to mold yourself to whatever is around you. It's not being yourself. It's not honoring who you truly are. It's simply about, gosh, it's just like, what are you going to wear tomorrow? Well, I'm going to wear, my knee socks tomorrow and a short skirt. And what are you going to wear tomorrow? So we all fit in together.
Right.
Rather than to belonging comes from a deeper internal place.
So she says that fitting in and belonging are not the same thing. And in fact, fitting in gets in the way of belonging. Fitting in is about assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be accepted, which is what you were just saying with the knee socks. And then belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change. It requires us to be who we are.
Right.
Belonging.
Right.
Wow, that's kind of cool.
Yep. Yep.
And there is this place of where, and I guess we're going back to life being so fluid, right? But there is this place where belonging, you don't necessarily know all the time where you belong, unless, or where you fit in. Let me use her paradigm here, where you fit in. But if you can really be yourself, then you're gonna belong wherever you show up.
Right.
That you are going to fit into the group that you show up in.
Right. And she goes on to say that practicing self-love is a way to nurture your belonging. That self-love means learning how to trust ourselves, to treat ourselves with respect, and be kind and affectionate toward ourselves. And how hard this is, how hard we are on ourselves sometimes, so that making this self-love thing be, is low on our list. We're not able to achieve that.
Sure. I mean, we're busy people, right? We got other people to take care of and jobs to show up at, and regardless of what we want to do.
Right.
And sometimes okay, so this is what I'm exploring. Sometimes self-love is saying, no, I'm not going to show up to that obligation that I said yes to. I'm going to call them and say, you know what? It's just, I can't be there today.
Yep.
Without an excuse.
Yep. And taking this back to compassion, she speaks about a couple barriers to compassion, and one of them is the fear of setting boundaries, and which could be sort of the fear of saying no.
Yep.
Having to say no, and the interest and holding people accountable.
Okay, this blows my mind. How is okay? Let's talk about, Joyce. I want to hear how that works, because being compassionate means setting boundaries and holding people accountable.
Right, holding people accountable, so that if it's laid out what the expectations are, like say a job, for instance, to make it a little more concrete, if this is what it's expected at your job, that you're there at 9 o'clock in the morning, and so if you show up at 9:30 on a regular basis, and that just and your boss just lets that go by, then you're not being held accountable. And people around you are noticing that and wondering why you're getting away with that, and just creating these feelings of discomfort and distrust, and you must be the favorite, and the way that our monkey minds take off on that, when really it's, if the boss said, hey, you know what, the deal was for you to be here at 9 o'clock, and if you can't do that, well, there's going to be consequences for that. I think accountability and consequences when you're not makes it not about the person, but about their behavior.
Okay. And that's being compassionate.
And that's being compassionate toward yourself and to them too, as to I think holding them to the standard that was set. Not that it's such a high standard, but this is the expectation. This is what you agreed to do when you signed on for this project or took this job.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great example, and my mind is twisting in it now, because I'm trying to wrap my mind around about this idea of compassion and boundaries and accountability. Because I see that this is my perfectionist view, right? Okay. I guess because I see that, like the job example you just did. I see that as that's the way you're supposed to show up.
Right.
And so if my boss said to me, well, you're slacking, you need to be here at 9, this is interesting. I know I would feel punished. I would feel ashamed. Wow. And I would not see that, because the perfectionist in me is like, well, I should have done better. And what if, if I could look at it from the boss's point of view in a compassionate way,
Right.
that person is helping me to be better at my job. How weird. Oh my gosh. That's weird because I am the hardest person on me.
That's
I know-
right. Many of us are. We're the hardest on ourselves. I would forgive you if you were half an hour late, once or twice.
Okay, thank you. I was waiting for that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I did the same thing. It's like, I'm caught in traffic. Oh my gosh, I should have left earlier. I should have known that there was going to be traffic because there always is. But,
Right.
yeah,
But we can't know that.
No.
We can't know that.
No.
So that's interesting that that compassion is about holding boundaries.
Holding people accountable and about setting boundaries in the first place. And we're afraid to set boundaries for people. Or I think
I
that
know as parents that's always the daily battle, right? Okay, am I holding strong boundaries for my child so they'll grow up good or okay or whatever, and then but with other adults we forget that stuff, I think.
Yeah, in a when you're in a business that's service oriented, there's always so I'm serving and I'm serving and I'm meeting this and I'm meeting that, and then where's the line where so this is as far as I can go in that. If you want more from me, then there's going to have to be a new agreement made. But right now, this is my boundary. This is as much as I can give for what you are paying me, if it's that kind of a service. This is what I can do up to that point. And then if I go beyond that, then I don't feel good about myself. I don't feel good about you. And then it creates this feeling of ick and discomfort,
And
when really
resentment.
perhaps we could have put on our big shoes and have said to one another, hey, we need to make a new agreement because this isn't working for me.
Yeah, that takes a lot of courage. I
It does. I think that's a lot of courage. I think
Okay,
it
maybe
really
that's
does.
just me too, right?
Well, it's hard to be because we don't want to cause a problem.
I know,
or
that's the
conflict.
perfectionist. Yep,
I'm
yep.
surprised. Conflict isn't one of her C's here. Courage, compassion, and connection. But we're avoiding conflict.
Conflict,
That's,
yeah.
what we
Well,
wanna
and
do.
that's what we do when we are in those protected places.
Yes.
I
Yep.
don't want to have the conflict come up and deal with it. So we're talking about finding the new normal, and we're talking about a book called The Gifts of Imperfection, and you're listening to Living Your Inspired Life. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back. And welcome back to Living Your Inspired Life. I'm Susan Burrell, and you're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA. And if you've missed anything about what we talk about on any of our shows, or we reference something and you think, gee, I didn't hear that, I missed it, everything is on the website, livingyourinspiredlife.org. All the radio shows, and in fact, some meditations and some inspirational activities to do. And there's also brand new on the page, a donation page. So if you like what you're hearing, if you like positive talk radio and tuning in to yourself and to others and practicing and developing your personal power perspective, a positivity in life, then please go to the donation page and make a donation to Living Your Inspired Life. That will keep us on the air and keep us bringing you more amazing authors and speakers and conversation. So today Joyce Sherwood, my producer, and I have been talking about finding the new normal, rebounding in your life and finding the new normal, which means moving forward, not living in your past and doing things the way you used to, but doing things from a new way. And we've been also doing a book study on this book called The Gifts of Imperfection, Letting Go of Who You Think You Were Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are by Brene Brown. And so one of the things that is paramount in Brene's work is this stuff about shame. So,
Brene says that the things that get in the way of courage, compassion, and connection are shame, fear, and vulnerability.
Ouch.
And she described shame. When she said it, I thought, oh, yes, I felt that. Shame is that warm feeling that washes over us, making us feel small, flawed, and never good enough. When I feel shame, the first thing I think I do is blush.
Really?
I feel warm. I feel a warmness over me. It's like, that's the first indication, like, something just happened that I'm not quite. I don't know quite what it was, and I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but I would like to take back what I said or what I did or what just happened.
Or how somebody reacted to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I get something in the pit of my stomach. That's what happens to me. Yeah, yuck.
And also other symptoms to recognize shame within yourself: dry mouth, time slowing down, tunnel vision, hot face, that's what I feel, and a racing heart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, those are the physical symptoms of shame.
Who knew? I mean, I haven't paid attention to myself like that to know that that's what's going on.
Yeah, and shame happens. It happens to everybody. There are 3 things she says we know about shame. We all have it. Shame is universal and one of the most primitive human emotions that we experience. The only people who don't experience shame lack the capacity for empathy and human connection in the first place. And number 2, we're all afraid to talk about shame. And number 3, the less we talk about shame, the more control it has over our lives.
Okay, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And that's very true. Okay, let's talk about those 3 things.
Okay.
What you just said, so it's clear. Everybody has experienced shame at some point in their life, probably multiple times.
Right.
Many times. And it doesn't mean that you had to have been physically or emotionally abused as a child to be feeling shame. Mm-hmm. We can have beautiful, wonderful childhoods and still have pockets of shame. Mm-hmm. And then the idea that it is that people don't want to talk about it because they're ashamed. And what happens then is it controls our lives.
Right. It grows in secrecy.
So we make decisions out of feeling ashamed sometimes.
Right.
That aren't necessary. If we could face that and allow ourselves to be vulnerable, like we were talking about earlier in the show, then that shame may not have so much control over us, yeah?
Yes, right. And that there's a difference between shame and guilt.
Okay,
I mean, I sort of think of those as the same thing. I would use one to describe the other, but no. Guilt is when you can say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. And shame is more, I'm sorry, I'm a mistake.
Ouch.
Guilt is about the behavior. Shame is about the person.
So then we think that that's the truth of who we are.
Oh yeah, we just jump right to the big one.
Oh yeah.
I'm a bad person. I'm lousy. I'm not good. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've done that. I'm sure there's plenty of people that have done that in their lifetime.
Yep. And it's about fear. We're afraid to share what we did or how many people saw what happened. And people won't like us if we know the truth about us or where we come from or what we believe or how much we're struggling or even how good we are. Because sometimes it's hard to own our strengths as well as our struggles and our weaknesses.
Oh, wow. Let's talk about that because that's... So how many people are hiding their light under a bushel, as my grandmother used to say.
That's right. I grew up in a small rural school, one of 17 kids, and I was the smartest kid in the class, and I was ashamed I was the smartest kid in the class. People would be like, "Oh, look at Joyce's paper. Oh, she got another A." I was like, "Oh, come on."
So talk about not being able to fit in because you were...
Yeah, I didn't feel like I didn't belong there, apparently, and so that was... then finally being able, as an adult, to look back on that experience and say, oh, well, I was just listening to the stories that people were telling me from their own experiences.
Right.
Yeah.
From their own feeling of inadequacy and feeling ashamed that they weren't good enough.
Right. Oh,
wow. So I wonder how everybody must walk around with this bag of feeling not good enough and I'm ashamed.
Yeah. So Brene Brown talks about let's develop some shame resilience.
Okay, so what's resilience again?
Let's recognize shame. Let's move through it. Let's maintain our worthiness, our authenticity, and then as we get through this process, then we have more courage, compassion, and connection as a result of our experience. And that part of working through this shame is being able to tell your story to someone who has earned the right to hear it. We're not just telling our story to every person that comes by, but to someone who really can listen to us and not judge and not try to fix, but simply hear it, and even to say, wow, that happened to me once too.
Right.
Something like that. We often talk about not getting stuck in our story and not having that same story run over and over and over. And yet, I think when it comes to shame, there's a point where telling the story releases the hold that it has on you.
Yeah, because I think you said this, but if not, I'm going to say it again, because shame loves secrecy.
Right.
That it does not want you to name it or talk about it or anything. And I know the handful of times that I've maybe shared with a friend or even a counselor something that I was ashamed of, it did feel like, I'm remembering now, talking about bodily feelings too, it did feel like a huge lifting off my shoulder, a huge burden taken off of my heart. And to say it to somebody that absolutely is going to be confidential. We have to be very aware of who we share these particular stories with, because people like to talk about you.
Right.
Fortunately or unfortunately. Yeah, I don't mind them talking about my good stuff, but I don't want them talking about my dirty underwear. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
right.
finding that one person that you trust, or two people that you trust, and that's your go-to person when you're feeling that vulnerable because you feel ashamed.
Right. So what I want to do when I feel ashamed is I want to hide. I want to be very quiet. I'm just going to withdraw and lick my wounds a little bit. See if I think about it enough, perhaps I can change how it happens.
Oh.
If I think about it, go through it enough times, perhaps I can go back and change what happened so that I don't feel this way again.
Oh God, I've done that.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen.
And you can't, because again, that's you're going back to wanting your life to be normal, the way it was before you did that act or said that thing or was accused of, or whatever it was. You want it to be normal, and again, it's having to find the new normal, and that means facing what you're feeling ashamed about.
Right. And having someone to share it with who may not even had the same experience, but there's so many threads connecting us that I think that we can find common ground for many things, and not that it becomes a storytelling back and forth. Who had the bigger shame? Well, you that happened to you, but when it happened to me, this is, there were thousands of people watching, not just 100 people watching. So simply developing, she talks about developing shame resilience. It's to know that it's not just you and you're not the only one, and to be able to move on, learn from it, move on, and
bounce back from that experience. Not bounce back, but maybe bounce forward.
Yeah, bounce forward.
Yeah. So, and that goes back to having the knowing that people want compassion and connection, and so sharing a story with someone that you're not proud of or that you're ashamed of gives that person the opportunity to be compassionate with you and to feel connected with you.
Right. And they can give that to you if you can, and you can receive that from then.
Right. And then we're talking about circulation again.
Right.
And then that person feels seen and heard.
Right.
And even though you're the one telling the story, they feel seen and heard and respected because you called on them.
Right. And we all want to be needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Joyce, you had some statistics about shame, that men and women see shame a little differently.
Yeah. This is from a TED Talk that Brene Brown gave in 2012. She says women have more aspects of their life in which they could be shamed than men do.
I find that fascinating.
Yeah, for women, and this is her opinion. Women, we have to do it all, do it perfectly, and never let them see you sweat. That we have so many expectations that we put upon ourselves, or that society has put upon us. Where men, their number one thing is do not be perceived as weak.
Do not be perceived as weak. Wow.
If a man is perceived as weak, that is his shame.
Wow.
If he is weak.
Wow.
I just thought that was really interesting too, that it, and simply, this is her research, this is her point of view, but that women have more shame triggers
Yeah, that's interesting
than
to
men
me.
do.
I love that statistic. So then in the resiliency, it's about being aware of, so just to reiterate, being aware of how you feel physically when you feel ashamed.
Right. That's
And then recognizing that shame loves secrecy and it doesn't want you talking about it. And so then in order to recover yourself from that, as soon as you can, is to find that one person that is your go-to person to share the story of, oh God, look what I just did. And I can't believe it. And I feel awful and I'm small and, and then to know and to trust and to get to the place where you don't judge yourself anymore about that.
Yep. And, she says when we experience shame, we feel disconnected and desperate for worthiness. So that
Wait, say that again?
When we experience shame, we feel disconnected and desperate for worthiness. So worthiness would be the opposite of shame.
Right.
I guess is what I'm seeing that there. And very much that full of shame or the fear of shame, we are more likely to engage in self-destructive behaviors and to attack or shame others. I mean, we've been hurt, so I'm gonna shame you right back.
And that goes back to what you were saying earlier of moving, of the new paradigm, of the new normal being, instead of competition,
right?
Which, okay, look at all the competitive things out there where they're attacking their person they think they're competing against. I mean, all we have to do is say politics, and that's what happens. So the competition, then if we can replace it with collaboration, with connection, heals the shame that all of us are carrying. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
Kind of sounds like it would.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So then wrapping that up into finding the new normal and recognizing that you want to be, I'm just going to claim it for me. I want to be courageous in my life. I have always wanted that, but to be courageous in the way that I experience my life, allowing my vulnerability instead of my perfectionism and my armor, allowing my vulnerability to lead me and allow me to experience life and other people, and then feeling the compassion within myself, facing the fear of the pain that I might experience because of that compassion for others.
Right.
I know, like, watching a story where I get, those tearjerker stories, usually it's because you cry because you feel compassionate for that person.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not watching any more of those kinds of movies because I don't want to experience the pain, that kind of stuff. So feeling compassionate with myself and then practicing it enough so that I can face that fear of pain when I have compassion for other people.
Yes.
Because that is the heart breaking open into greater love when that happens. And then recognizing that in that vulnerability of compassion, there is that connection.
Right.
Connection to myself and my deeper inner self, and connection to others. So that I am claiming as my new normal.
Okay.
My new normal, everybody.
Alrighty.
I want to live in courage, compassion, connection, allowing my vulnerability to lead me into greater experiences of self-care and love inside me and in connection to other people. That's what I'm going to claim.
That's great. That's big.
So so Joyce Sherwood and I, my producer and collaborator, have decided that what we want to do is come back in 2 weeks and do more of this book, The Gifts of Imperfection, because within it, Brene Brown has these things she calls guideposts, and let's just read a couple of them so people
there are 10 guideposts that you can practice on yourself, ways of being and doing and acting in the world and with yourself that will create, that will engage you in better connection and courage and compassion.
So let me just read a couple of those really quick. Letting go of what people think, letting go of perfection, letting go of numbing and powerlessness, letting go of scarcity and fear of the dark, letting go of the need for certainty, letting go of comparison, letting go of exhaustion. So we're going to come back in 2 weeks and we're going to finish the conversation on this book. Joyce, thank you so much for being here with me today. This has been really
You're welcome.
thought-provoking, yeah?
Fun.
So you've been listening to Living Your Inspired Life. Go to livingyourinspiredlife.org to get caught up. And I'm going to just finish with, and so it is, namaste.